I recently found this fantasy map I drew when I was 14, and was surprised to find that I had come up with the idea of having a giant wall in the north years before I read A Song of Ice and Fire. Though I'm pretty sure that my wall was a solid slab of rock. I started writing fantasy stories around a year before then when I was 13, and 10 years after that I started drawing a fantasy webcomic. But I still always say that I got into world building just a few years ago, because the thing I'm doing now does not feel like the thing I was doing before. When I started writing the script for my webcomic, I set down some ground rules for my fantasy world, and then I just made stuff up as I went along, often just throwing things in as I was drawing the page. And it worked perfectly well, because in a story, every aspect of a world is there to further the plot, or explore a character, or set the mood, or any combination of those. Every single thing that exists in that world is ultimately there in service of the story. Though in a visual medium like a comic, making for a pretty visual to look at also works, except that those pretty visuals are also, ultimately, there in service of the story. But just as a drawing doesn't have to be there for the sake of a story, and can be appreciated as a work of art that stands on its own, a world doesn't have to be shackled to anything either, be that thing a novel, a comic, a game, or something else. But I've seen people say that a world with no story is pointless, that nobody really cares about worlds, that a world as a whole is this cold, impersonal thing that excites no emotion and creates no attachment, that nobody cares about anybody's cool new world-building idea, so they should just go write a story to make people care. But I know that this cannot be true, because I've read fantasy novels where those stories that were supposed to be the thing I actually cared about left me feeling completely unimpressed. But I loved their settings and all the awesome ideas they contained. Worlds, in and of themselves, are interesting and are worthwhile, and worlds grab people's imaginations and make them write their own stories all the time. And just as the considerations that go into a standalone drawing are different from the considerations that go into an individual comic panel, building a world that is meant to be able to stand on its own two legs is very different from creating a setting for a fantasy story. Fantasy and sci-fi writers are constantly warned against falling too deep into the world-building rabbit hole, since it often ends up distracting them from writing the story itself. Before I got into world building just for the sake of building a world, I had no issue avoiding all those rabbit holes, but now I dive straight into them instead because the change in goals changed the nature of the activity itself. So I don't say that I got into world building in my early teens, because those rabbit holes held no interest to me back then. I was excited about my characters and their cool adventures, not about staple crops, timber frame houses, and convoluted family arrangements. In the first video on this channel, I start creating a temperate rainforest island by creating 50 species of fungi, because when building a world is the thing you're out to do, fungi are really just one of the many rabbit holes you dive into, and the number of those rabbit holes is countless, which makes me very excited because every single one of them is a wonderful opportunity for exercising creativity and a fascinating new avenue to explore. There are no limits to imagination, and that fact just leaves me in awe.